Good morning, everyone. Today, on this episode of Generic Garage, we buy a stool. I go to Whataburger. I talk to a bunch of grown men on the internet. And we figure out I bought the wrong bearings. Stay tuned. Alrighty everyone, so last time we left off, I was waiting on some bearings to come in. We determined that our bearing clearances were too loose and I needed tighter bearings. I went online searching for the bearings anywhere other than Summit because the date just kept moving up every day as I checked. I went on eBay, there was nothing in America. I checked on Canada, Europe, a couple other places, and then finally Australia, and lo and behold, the bearings I was looking for were in Australia. Well, then this happened. That's right. Snow in San Antonio, Texas. We haven't had this kind of snow since 1985. I'd say we probably got about 4 inches the other day, and it just kind of gummed everything up. So because of all of that snow, the bearings were basically just sitting at a UPS warehouse for about a week until they arrived the other day when I started to put them on and see how our clearances were looking. And then I found out I made a big mistake because, well, I'm stupid. These bearings are 0.010 undersized, not 0.001 undersized. I misplaced the decimal point. With that decimal place being off by 1, we were off by a factor of 10, so of course these bearings are just not gonna work for us. So there's 120 bucks right out the window. Oh well, my mistake. Mistakes happen, it's okay. The guys over on 8.2 Deck Mafia, big shout out to y'all, told me that my clearance of 0.0025 to 0.0030 was actually just fine. That means that today we are going to put all of the rod bearings in and then start filing rings. All of our bearing clearances are between 0.0026 and 0.0030. We're going to call that runnable based on all the comments from everybody on the Facebook group. So before we can install those rods, we need to prep our pistons, which means now is the time to file rings. So once you've got your cylinder walls all nice and clean with a paper towel, make sure you put some lube back on there. I like to take a little bit of, like transmission fluid or something. Just get a little on the paper towel, just kind of wipe it around in there. I'm sure you got something on there to keep you from scratching those cylinder walls. Doesn't take much. The only rings that we have to worry about are our top rings and our second rings. You don't have to worry about gapping these oil rings. You should never have a problem with those. You need a little file to deburr. You're gonna need a ring separator. Technically you don't need one, but you know, it helps. And then you need one of these little ring filers. This one was a Jegs. Yeah, it seems to look all right. So the first thing to note about these rings is that they do have a directionality to them. On every single ring that you buy, there should be some sort of indicator as to which direction these rings need to be installed. The dot, for instance, on the second ring, that indicates that this side of the ring needs to be facing the top of the piston. So this ring will be installed on this piston just like this. On this first ring, I don't see any indicator on this side. When I flip it over, there's two indicators for me here. One, I have a letter N right there. It's very small, I don't know if you can see it. And then the top of this ring is beveled on the inside. So this will go installed with that letter N up, and this will go installed with the dot up. Okay, so now what you want to do is take your ring, set it up vertical so your gap is on top there, push it down in there, rotate it, and you want it square in the block. And since we're building a new engine, we don't need a special tool for that. We have a piston. You can set the piston right down on there and get it nice and square in the block. Just like that. Now what you'll notice is that that gap has completely disappeared. You cannot install rings in this manner. If this was installed like this, this ring would heat up and expand, and because there's no gap for it to close up, you'll start pushing it out, warping it, digging into the cylinder walls, and then you get a failed motor. So we need to increase that gap. Let's go file it. So like all the other videos on YouTube will tell you, the important thing about grinding these rings is that you're filing from the outside in. You don't want to be pushing metal out for this to create a burr or something weird on here to grab on the cylinder wall. If you go in, all of that deformation will appear on the inside of the ring. So take it slow, take your time. It's a little difficult, tricky to hold. Looks like it's taken off material pretty quick, actually. Once we've taken a little bit of material off, we come back over. And because we know we've ground outside in, there shouldn't be any burrs on here to scratch the cylinder walls while you're doing these checks. Put it in here, rotate it, drop your piston in there. That's square. You still don't have much of a gap at all. That's probably actually closed up perfectly. So now we got to just take it back to the grinder, but eventually what's going to happen is you'll be able to take one of your feeler gauges here. Here's my .017. You'll be able to fit it inside of that gap nice and snug. And when you got that far, you know that ring's good to go. So after taking your time and doing that slowly and methodically, here's our 17, and fits right in there perfectly. And our 18 does not fit in there. It's too big. So we know we got it right at 17. Okay, now that we got that one ring done, we need to do that for the rest of the top rings, the rest of the second rings, and then we can put all the rings on the pistons, put the pistons on the rods, and then we can put the rods in the motor. We got all of our rings filed. Only took about an hour and a half. So now, where our rods go? There they are. Now we can start working, putting our pistons on our rods. So there's a few things to note when you're putting your pistons on your rods. These parts are meant to go one direction. There's a large chamfer on this side of the rod, and there's a small chamfer on this side of the rod. This large chamfer is to help clear the radius on the rod journal. So you can remember that the two rods will have their small chamfers in the middle and they'll meet. And the large chamfer will be on the outside. Now, the other thing to note is the position of that rod journal relative to your cylinder. This is the number 5 cylinder. Its rod is going to sit on the back half of that rod journal. The other thing to note is that if you have 2 valve reliefs, like I do, those valve reliefs need to be aimed at the top of the lifter valley there. Don't turn it upside down, right side up. Putting those two things together, we can see that this chamfer needs to face the back of the rod journal. So this piston needs to be installed onto this rod, just like that. One thing that should come with each of your piston kits will be a diagram showing you where they want the ring gaps at. Our second compression ring is going to be on the 9 o'clock position. Top compression ring gap is going to be on the opposite side. And then our oil ring gaps, which are the really thin, small ones at the bottom, they want them, I'd say about 10 o'clock and 7 o'clock. Get some brake cleaner, get a paper towel, clean off your wrist pin, clean off your wrist pin bearing surface in there, and clean off anything that's in here, and then blow it all out with some air. We'll slide that wrist pin in, we'll put these clips in, we'll use assembly lube to do all of that, and then we'll install our rings. If you feel confident without using one of these ring tools, go ahead and just do it. Try not to score up the sides of your piston though. And when you're using those, be very careful because you can snap those rings. You don't need to try to expand them as far as they'll possibly go. Just enough to fit over the piston when you're installing them. Double check your orientation of your rods and your pistons before you start putting everything together, because the last thing you want to do is realize when you get all the pistons in, and rods all bolted down and everything torqued to spec, that, oh man, I got something backwards or I got something upside down. So just double check yourself. Clean everything, use assembly lube, follow the instructions that come with your pistons. Those C-clips were no joke. It took all of my finger strength, and I didn't really get it figured out until about the 5th one. But then there was kind of a process to it. We got everything put together. I double checked it, it should all be right. Now we gotta lube up the motor and start putting all of these pistons and rods and everything in there. 2 out of 8, 25% of the way done. Well, with that stuff anyways. However, it's getting late, dinner is ready, I need a shower. But I'll tell you what, I'll get the rest of these Pistons in this week, and we'll go from there. We still have to, you know, throw the cam in, lifters, timing chain, all that stuff still has to go in. There's a couple other side projects going on at the same time. If you like this video, please subscribe. I'm trying to get more and more subscribers, like everybody is. Real quick, before I go, we are printing some parts that are actually going to be for this truck. I need to come up with some long tube headers because I can't find any that work for this year model with this motor. And the headers that I have on there right now are actually pretty small. They're probably not going to be very good flow for this motor. So as soon as some more of these are done and we get to that stage, I'll show you what this stuff's all about. At some point we have to order heads for this motor. That's going to be coming up real soon. Tax refund season. Hey, if you haven't done your taxes, go do your taxes. The sooner you do them, the faster you get your money. Thanks for sticking with me. I'm gonna go eat and take a shower. Y'all have a great week. Take care.